Senators Hawley, Cruz, and Blackburn rattle this woke Biden judge with their tough questions about her radical stance on reproductive health.
You said in this op-ed that pregnancy resource centers are nothing but faux clinics, that's your word, that pose as real medical facilities. Do you remember writing this?
I don't remember that particular article, Senator, but I take your word for it.
You don't, it was 2018, you don't remember writing it?
Just not that particular article, but I'm happy to answer whatever questions you may have about it.
Well, let me just ask what you meant by faux clinics. Do you stand by that pregnancy resource centers are faux clinics that pose as medical facilities? Faux means fake, of course, so you're saying that they're fake clinics?
Absolutely not, Senator. Again, I was just referring to the amicus brief that I'd written as an advocate in that case, which shared stories of women from California who had gone to some pregnancy centers without understanding that they didn't provide any medical services at that particular center.
Well, how about this? Is an ultrasound a legitimate medical procedure in your view?
Of course, Senator.
Okay. So countless pregnancy resource centers provide ultrasounds. Those are medical procedures. And yet you're saying that they're faux clinics.
Senator, I absolutely support all parents having the resources they need. In that article, I was merely speaking as an advocate about the particular law that had just been evaluated by the Supreme Court, which was a consumer protection law in response to some women who had felt misled by some centers. You
were using the Supreme Court's decision as an opportunity to tarnish and to go after pregnancy resource centers, which is frankly something we've seen from our friends here on the left who would like to eliminate these pregnancy resource centers and shut them down all across the country. They're very open about that. I'm just trying to figure out, is that your view too? Would you like to see these pregnancy resource centers that provide this free medical care to women shut down across the country so that free medical care for women is no longer available?
Senator, once again, I was just speaking about one particular law in California that was enacted as a consumer protection law just to make sure that all women could have whatever information they needed to make the best decisions for themselves. That's all that I was speaking about.
Let me ask you about the Supreme Court's decision in the 2007 case, Gonzalez versus Carhart. You're familiar with that case, I assume.
Yes, I know that case.
Let me just read briefly from the case. Dr. Haskell went in with forceps and grabbed the baby's legs and pulled them down into the birth canal. Then he delivered the baby's body and arms, everything but the head. Then the doctor stuck the scissors into the back of his head and the baby's arms jerked out. The doctor opened up the scissors, stuck a high-powered suction tube into the opening and sucked the baby's brains out. That's partial birth abortion. Congress banned this procedure by bipartisan majority in 2003. Do you think Congress made the right call there?
Senator, what I know is that the Supreme Court upheld that act, I believe about 15 years ago, and it's been settled law in the country for all of that time. And of course, I will faithfully follow it if I were so fortunate as to become a judge.
Well, I'm asking because in 2019, news outlet in Oklahoma quoted you saying you oppose any attempt to regulate abortion procedures. The article says that you opposed an Oklahoma state law that, quote, bans dismemberment abortions. And it quotes a public statement you released saying, we cannot overstate the harm this decision will have on women in Oklahoma. Politicians should never take medical options off the table for pregnant patients. So you're against bans on partial birth abortion?
No, Senator. The law has been settled there for 15 years. And just to be clear, all of the work that I did as an advocate was within the confines of Supreme Court precedent, which allowed states to impose limits on abortion, but also recognized that women should be able to make their own personal medical decisions.
Well, my time has expired. I know there are other senators who want to ask questions, so I will return the floor to the chairman. I just want to say in conclusion, Ms. Rickleman, that I have to say that your characterization of pregnancy centers, your opposition to, frankly, radical pro-abortion laws, I think are very, very troubling. And it gives me grave concern about your nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Biden is attempting to fundamentally change our judiciary. Biden has decided, with the complicity of Senate Democrats, to abandon the notion of fair and impartial judges who apply the law, and instead to fill the bench with partisan zealots. Ms. Rickleman, unfortunately, I look at your career and I see that it embodies precisely this pattern. You have spent the majority of your professional life as an extreme zealot advocating for abortion. That is clearly a heartfelt and personal passion of you. It is a passion you've decided to devote your life to. But it is not remotely within the mainstream. Your views on abortion are not middle of the road. They're not views that most people in their typical lives encounter. You believe, for example, that abortion ought to be entirely legal right up until the moment of birth, including the 9th month of pregnancy. Is that correct?
No, Senator. As an advocate, I always worked within Supreme Court precedent, which only permitted abortion until viability.
You believe, I didn't ask what the law was, I asked what your belief was. You believe that abortion should be legal up until the moment of birth, including in the 9th month.
Senator, that's not a position I ever took as an advocate.
What do you believe?
My personal views will not impact any of my decisions.
Are you willing to answer the question? I understand. I watched you answer Senator Hawley, and you said, oh, I didn't say that there, I didn't say that there. What do you believe?
Senator, the work that I did at the center was to protect women's ability.
Let me try it again. Do you believe abortion should be legal in the 9th month of pregnancy?
Senator, all of my work has been to protect...
So you're refusing to answer the question. I'm not asking about your work. It's a very simple question. Do you believe it should be legal in the 9th month of pregnancy?
Senator, my personal views do not matter.
So you're refusing to answer. All right, let's try something else. Do you believe crisis pregnancy centers are a good thing or a bad thing?
Senator, again, my personal views don't matter.
You're refusing to answer that question also. So that's exactly what a zealot would do. They won't tell this committee, they won't tell the American people. The reason you won't answer, I believe, that you advocate unlimited abortion in the 9th month of pregnancy is because you know 91% of Americans disagree with you. Tens of millions of Americans who consider themselves pro-choice say, that is crazy to abort a child in the 9th month of pregnancy, and you've spent your entire life fighting for that. Let's take crisis pregnancy centers. You're nominated for the First Circuit. That means you interviewed with Senator Elizabeth Warren, and you got her support. Now, you have very few connections to the First Circuit. You've been in New York and Alaska much of your career. Senator Warren has said, quote, with Roe gone, it's more important than ever to crack down on so-called crisis pregnancy centers that mislead and deceive patients seeking abortion care. Do you agree with Senator Warren?
Senator, as an advocate, I only worked on cases
I didn't ask what you have advocated for. I asked, do you agree with Senator Warren?
Senator, under the Code of Judicial Conduct, which applies to nominees, I'm not allowed to share personal views.
You're not allowed, judicial nominees are not allowed to have any personal views on any issues of public policy? Is that your testimony to this committee?
The Code of Judicial Conduct does specifically say that it would be inappropriate to share any personal views as a nominee because it would suggest that I could prejudge issues. And
so Senator Warren has filed legislation that would shut down crisis pregnancy centers all across the country, denying women care that they need and want. Do you agree with that legislation?
Senator, all of my advocacy has been to help
Again,
women make...
you're not answering my question. Do you agree with that legislation?
Senator, it would be inappropriate for me to comment on pending legislation.
Have you seen that legislation?
I have not, Senator.
Have you discussed that legislation with Senator Warren or her staff?
No, absolutely not.
So let me ask another question. As you know, the Dobbs opinion was leaked. It's one of the greatest violations of trust in the Supreme Court in the history of this nation. Do you have any knowledge whatsoever as to the identity of the leaker?
Absolutely not, Senator. And as a former law clerk to an appellate judge, I understand how critical confidentiality is for judges and their law clerks.
You wrote a law review article advocating against DNA testing for convicted criminals, for convicted murderers, convicted rapists, convicted pedophiles. The view you advocated has been rejected by the Supreme Court. It's not good law. Do you still maintain your belief then that it was unconstitutional to take the DNA of convicted murderers, rapists, and pedophiles?
Senator, the Supreme Court has determined that issue, and I will faithfully follow the Supreme Court's decision, as I will follow
agree
all
with
of their decisions. It does not matter if I agree with the Supreme Court's decision.
But do you agree? I get to decide if it matters. You get to decide how to answer the question. Do you agree with the decision?
Senator, it would be inappropriate for me to comment on
So there's
Supreme Court
literally
decisions.
nothing you're going to answer. Thank you.
Ms. Reichelman, I want to come to you again on the DNA question and your answer to Senator Grassley on that. One of the things we've talked about a good bit lately is the need for rape kit processing and the importance of that in getting violent offenders, perpetrators off the streets. So I think you're trying to kind of work around the constitutionality issue of this. To me, your answer's a little bit fuzzy. Your comments that you're writing in the past has been something that would lead me to ascertain that you support the criminal instead of supporting the victim. So I would like to hear from you. In this regard, do you believe DNA testing is unconstitutional? Or do you accept the court's determination that the Fourth Amendment permits states to obtain DNA from these violent perpetrators and criminals?
Thank you, Senator. I absolutely accept the court's interpretation. I will follow all Supreme Court precedent on the Fourth Amendment, and I understand how critical it is for law enforcement to be able to obtain evidence that they need in making sure that they are doing everything they can to keep us safe.
What would have led you then in 2007 in that law review article to look at taking DNA as being unconstitutional?
Senator, in that article, I was writing only about a very narrow part of Fourth Amendment doctrine, something called the special needs exception.
I realize that, but to look at that and then to think about how important DNA is in making these determinations and getting those tests back to local law enforcement so that they can apprehend these individuals that are violent criminals. This makes me really uneasy when I read that and then I hear your answer and I feel as if you're wanting to nuance where you are on that issue. We have a terrible crime issue in this country. We have seen it in city after city. In my state, in Memphis, it has been heartbreaking to see the crime that has played out there. We've seen an uptick in crime in the Nashville area. And it is going to be important that this nation return to a tough on crime posture. It is going to be important that we get these violent criminals off the street. So that does cause me a little bit of concern. I'm also concerned about what I see, and I know Senator Grassley talked with you about this, really the lack of a significant connection to the court to which you would have a lifetime appointment to. Currently, you're not even admitted to practice before the First Circuit, and you were only admitted to the Massachusetts bar in December. Did you do that in order to be nominated for a judgeship?
No, Senator, absolutely not. I grew up in Massachusetts and spent more than 20 years of my life living there. I moved back to Massachusetts during the pandemic shortly after it began to take care of my parents who've lived there continuously because they're in poor health. And I wanted to be able to be close to them and able to help them on a weekly basis. And that's when I moved back and then became a member of the Massachusetts bar.
Okay. All right.